In this video, I want to present some of the main tenets of Frege's philosophy of language, which sometimes we'll refer to as Fregean semantics. If we recall from the previous video, what motivates Fregean semantics or Frege's philosophy of language is or are the puzzles of identity statements and propositional attitude reports. Both of these puzzles seem to suggest that the naive theory is false because it appears that there are certain sentences with co-referential terms that under the simple theory, they would entail mean the same thing. However, intuitively, we think that they actually differ in cognitive significance. In order to solve these puzzles, Frege introduces a two-tiered theory of semantic properties. What Frege thinks is that every linguistic expression actually has two different semantic properties. One, which we're already familiar with, which we call reference. So linguistic expressions have a referent. But in addition to this, linguistic expressions also have this other semantic property known as a sense, or is what he calls a sense. Now, Frege is never quite explicitly clear. He doesn't provide us with a definition of what a sense is. But one thing that the senses of linguistic expressions are supposed to be is senses are supposed to be these kind of qualitative representations or aspects of objects. So one way of thinking about it is that the sense of a linguistic expression is like a property or a collection of properties that is representative of an object. There are two main features that senses are supposed to have. So the sense of a linguistic expression, for example, the sense of a singular term or a proper name like Hector, is supposed to account for the cognitive significance of the name or linguistic expression Hector. In addition to accounting for the cognitive significance, senses are also supposed to be the things that determine what linguistic expressions refer to. So these two features here are supposed to be essential features of what senses are. A sense is a qualitative representation that is supposed to account for the cognitive significance of a linguistic term, and it is also supposed to be the thing that determines what the referent of the linguistic term is going to be. One version of Frege's theory is what is sometimes known as or referred to as Fregean Descriptivism. According to Fregean Descriptivism, the sense of any proper name is just a qualitative description or a qualitative set of information of the following form, the phi, where phi is just a set of properties that apply to a specific object. And it is these set of properties, this descriptive content, if you will, the phi expressed by the name, that is supposed to determine what the referent of the name in question is. So here's an example. Take the name Hector, right? So according to Fregean Descriptivism, the meaning of Hector is not Hector himself. It's not me, the person Hector. Instead, it is a qualitative description, something like the person who is teaching philosophy of language at Cal State San Bernardino in the fall of 2020. Right? That is supposed to be the meaning of the name Hector. That sense, the person teaching philosophy of language at Cal State San Bernardino for the fall of 2020, is not only supposed to be the meaning of the name Hector, but is also supposed to be the thing that determines what the name Hector refers to. And the way that it determines what the name Hector refers to is because it picks out a unique individual who satisfies that condition. So there is only one individual who is teaching philosophy of language at Cal State San Bernardino for the fall of 2020, and that person is me. So the name Hector has as its sense, I'm not going to repeat that entire thing, that particular qualitative description, and as its reference, it has me. And it is in virtue of the sense that is expressed by the name Hector, and also in addition to that, in virtue of the fact that I satisfy that description, that the name Hector refers to me. Now, strictly speaking, senses are not descriptions. And the reason for that is because descriptions are linguistic terms. So they're also linguistic items. So a better way of formulating what Frege is trying to say is not that the sense of a proper name, say like Aristotle. Let's say that we take the following description. Who is Aristotle? If you're asked, well, the teacher of Alexander the Great. Well, the sense of Aristotle is not the actual description, the teacher of Alexander the Great. In other words, the sense of Aristotle is something along the lines of the sense that would be expressed by the following description, right? Because this description, the teacher of Alexander the Great, as a linguistic item, is going to have as its sense something like the qualitative features of being the teacher of Alexander the Great. So I try to differentiate this by, putting this into little pointy brackets and just denoting this by the sense. So the better way of thinking about the Fregean theory is the following. The sense of a proper name like Aristotle is equivalent to the sense that would be expressed by a description that the person Aristotle would satisfy, right? So in other words, here, whatever this property is, being the teacher of Alexander the Great or something of that sort, right? So Aristotle, the name, has as its sense something like the qualitative description or the qualitative properties being the teacher of Alexander the Great. And it is in virtue of this sense that Aristotle, the person, is the referent of the name Aristotle. Why? Because Aristotle, the person, is the one and only individual that satisfies this description. So again, the senses of names are not linguistic entities. They are different types of entities. They are the meanings of linguistic entities. One way of thinking of senses is, again, they are qualitative representations of objects out in the world. Now, one thing that Frege emphasizes is that senses, while being qualitative representations of things out in the world, senses are not images or concepts of things out in the world. And the reason for this is because images or concepts are mental entities. Those are things that exist in our minds, right? So for instance, my idea of Aristotle is something that exists in my mind. If I were to die today, then my idea of Aristotle is gone from the world. But what Frege wants to maintain is that the sense of the name Aristotle is not gone whenever I'm gone. And that's because the sense of Aristotle is something that is abstract, right? So remember, the simple theory held that the meaning of Aristotle was Aristotle himself. But we'll see that there are some problems with that because Aristotle is no longer around, but Aristotle still seems to have a name. Well, what about my idea of Aristotle? Again, if I die, then my idea of Aristotle is gone. So the sense of the name Aristotle, because Aristotle still seems to have a meaning, the name Aristotle still seems to have a meaning, that is neither a mental object or a physical object. It is an abstract object. It is something that exists independently of what we believe, so it's mind independent, and is also spatial-temporally independent. It is abstract. It exists neither in space-time or in our minds. It's a little bit of a difficult concept to get your head around, but this is important for Frege's picture. And the reason this is important for Frege's picture is because one of the things that Frege maintained is that meanings are shareable across time and space. In other words, when I say, for instance, Hector works at Cal San Bernardino, the meaning of that sentence is the meaning of the sentence that, say, somebody else would utter in a different part of, say, the state. If they say Hector works at Cal San Bernardino, according to Frege, both that person and I mean exactly the same thing when we utter that sentence because those two sentences have expressed the same sense. In other words, they express the same meaning, right? And the only way to make sense of that is if we maintain that meanings are not spatial, temporal, or mind dependent, but are instead abstract. They are independent from all of that. Now, it is important to note that while senses are mind independent, the sense that is associated with a particular name, so for instance, if I use the name Aristotle and it expresses the sense, the teacher of Alexander the Great, that sense that is associated with the name is mind dependent in the following way, is that my intentions, or I have I have a concept of Aristotle, and it's that concept that picks out a specific sense that is associated with the name, right? So my concept is mind dependent. My concept of Aristotle depends on me, but the sense doesn't depend on me. However, my concept helps determine what sense I am associating with the name Aristotle. And in that sense, what sense is associated with any particular name is going to be dependent on the individual. So maybe the sense that I associate with the name Aristotle could differ from the sense that you associate with Aristotle. So maybe I have a concept of Aristotle as being the teacher of Alexander the Great, and you have a concept of Aristotle as the greatest pupil of Plato. So when we use the term Aristotle, those two usages of the name Aristotle can be associated with different senses. So that is a feature of the Fregean picture. So we can try to illustrate that with the following. So let's say that I have an idea or a concept of Aristotle in my mind, right? And then I utter Aristotle. Well, the sense of Aristotle is going to be this abstract, mind-independent thing, but it is my concept that is going to determine which sense is going to be associated with the term Aristotle. And again, it is in virtue of the sense that is associated with the name Aristotle that the person Aristotle will be picked out. This is important because it has traditionally been thought that language kind of gives us information about what's going on in people's mind. So one important question in the philosophy of language is, what is the association or relationship between language and the mind? And Frege is trying to present this picture, right? Language or meanings, linguistic meanings, are these abstract things called senses. But the way that they are related to our mind is that it is our concepts in our mind that determine which sense will be associated with the words that we are using. And this is how words serve as vehicles of communicating what is going on in our mind, right? Because there's no way you can get in my mind and see what's going on in my mind. You only know what I'm thinking or what I want to, what I'm thinking by the words that I use. So how does all this work? Well, Frege says the way this works is you have a concept in your mind. That concept picks out a sense that is kind of tagged on, if you will, or associated with the linguistic expression. And I'm also, over here, you're a competent speaker. Well, this would be someone else. This person may be a competent speaker of the language, so they will be able to grasp the same sense, and then that will be associated to what's going on in their mind. Now, this is supposed to be Aristotle. That's what I was trying to illustrate here. It's also the sense that we associate with the term that is going to determine the referent, but I'm hoping you get the picture. So, with that said, the way that Frege goes about solving the problem of identity statements is by saying, look, the reason the sentence, the morning star is the morning star, and the sentence, the morning star is the evening star, the reason those seem to differ cognitively or have different cognitive significances is not because they, what they refer to, because they refer to the same thing, namely Venus being identical to itself. The reason they differ in cognitive significance is because both of those sentences express different meanings or different senses, because the sense of the morning star, the term the morning star, is going to be different than the sense of the evening star. All right. So this two-tiered theory of semantics is meant to solve the problem of identity statements, and the motivation for this was the shortcomings of the simple theory. So I'm hoping that I could summarize at least these main tenets of the Fregean theory with the following slide right here. So please go over this slide right here. This should try to capture some of the main tenets that I just described of Fregeanism. And if you have any questions, please let me know.